This ain't just a Toy Story or a foreign unboxing. These are the stories of action, toy glory, and work clocking. SH Figuarts, Black Series are hot toys. And figures with transformation sequences that make noise. Check out the joints and the many points of articulation. We're celebrating the global collector nation. Sit back, relax, and get ready to rock this. Here's the real Chow. Welcome.
I am so excited to have our guest for this episode of Shelf Conscious. I've always wanted to be a guest on Blank Check with Griffin and David, and this is probably the best alternative to have Griffin be on this show. Please welcome to Shelf Conscious, Griffin Newman.
I will say I am feeling genuinely shelf-conscious because your collection is so like organized and camera ready, and I just had to spend the last 20 minutes reorganizing to a different corner of my apartment that was slightly more photogenic. But I don't really have my shit together.
It's all
shelf-wise. Yeah,
you don't have to. This is more of a merchandise spotlight than a
sure. Well, that's why I'm choosing. I'm gonna spotlight on a one curated, somewhat organized corner of a collection rather than the mess that is.
And
the
for
rest
what
of
it's
my
worth,
home.
Orko is not the only thing you collect. One of the reasons you're on this show is that I know from being a fan of Blank Check and following you on social media is that you yourself are a action figure collector. I mean, I've seen you on Dan Larson's show. I see you talk about it. The merchandise spotlight is my favorite segment. That is too infrequent on Blank Check because you don't.
Look, I agree.
You don't do enough.
Constantly
not a lot
fighting.
of John Carpenter action figures, is what I'm saying.
Well, Neca's been filling in those gaps.
That's true. The Kurt Russell thing figures.
A couple
really cool.
of them, right? They did those, and then they've had their run of like the sort of retro figures. So I have the They Live sets that they did.
John Carpenter was the wrong. I just said that because that was the most recent.
I know. No, I know.
But
I think
Nancy Myers doesn't have a lot.
Correct. That's a better example. There was a John Carpenter void for a while, and I feel like NECA's been stepping up to the plate. I mean, it's bizarre. I think I did a merchandise spotlight on this episode, but we did our episode on the Fog.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's such a change of winds that Carpenter is so hip now that they make an action figure of Captain Blake, who is a character you never see.
Right.
Like, he's literally just a silhouette with eyes the whole movie. And you can buy, like, they have two different Captain Blake figures now. They have, like, a Toonie Terror and a Retro.
It's almost like too many action figure options nowadays. You know what I mean? Like, literally everything gets toys.
I don't know. I mean, we're just going straight into the deep end here.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have this, too, but I've shared this conversation with a lot of other collectors, but I feel like the pandemic was terrible for my collecting impulses, just because it's like you're stuck at home so much, you're going out so much less. It's like one of the few things you can do that feels active is like searching for items.
Right. eBay, Big Bad Toy Store, all that stuff.
Right. Trying to find, fill in missing holes, but also trying to find good deals on things and these pre-orders and whatever. And it was also just like when things were really locked down, receiving boxes with new things from the outside world felt like such a joy. But I've talked to so many friends on where I'm just like, out of room. Don't know how to put anything anywhere now. I guess I need to move. Yeah.
Were you a hunter? Because New York, Manhattan isn't the best place to go hunting for toys.
No, I am. I mean, I lived in East Harlem for a couple of years, and there's like a big Target near there. For a while, it was one of the only Targets in New York City. Now they've been more popping up, but they're mostly sort of like mini Target Expresses that don't really
have big aisles, right?
They might have like one toy aisle, and they don't have the sort of like NECA collector section at all. But there was one that was like 2 blocks away from me that I would troll a lot. And then the other thing I do, I mean, and even in the pandemic, it became like the one thing I could actively do is just, I rarely can walk by a Walgreens without going in just to see, like, what if they have the one Legends figure I'm looking for, And New York Walgreens, I mean, their Dwayne Reeds here are small enough as well that, like, you don't have an expansive display, but, like, the feeling of finding a good one is quite the rush. Yeah.
Yeah, and for what it's, I mean, anyone who's listening to this show knows, but, like, for, like, the normies out there, yes, you go to Walgreens to buy toys. Like that's something that people do. It's few and far between because they never fucking like update their stock and inventory.
Right.
But
and especially in lieu of like post Toys R Us. I mean, that's the big shift. Is like for so many years it was we had this fucking gargantuan. I'm allowed to curse on this, or am I making work for you having to bleep all this out?
Curse all you like. That makes the show even better.
I never realize how much I curse until I go onto someone else's show and then haven't asked that question. I'm like, it's the only time I get self-conscious about it.
I mean, are there even podcasts that don't have the explicit rating anymore? It's like every podcast is explicit, you know?
Sometimes I'll say fuck casually like that and I'll see someone wince, and then that's why I ask. I'm like, oh, am I making more work for you later? There was the gargantuan Toys R Us in Times Square, and there used to be other Toys R Us's as well across the 5 boroughs, but that made hunting a lot easier, even if we didn't have any Walmarts and few Targets, you know? And then all the comic book stores that I would troll. And I think the number of comic book stores has shrunk, and there are more Targets with a limited selection. Toys R Us is gone, so like...
Internet, baby.
Well, internet, yeah, but I do miss hunting. So it's why I said I truly... Unless I'm running horribly late, which is often a thing, if I walk past a Walgreens, I go in, beeline to the toy section, see if there's anything, and walk out, which makes me not shelf-conscious, but self-conscious. I think I always read to people like I'm a shoplifter, because I like walk in, go to one aisle, and walk out.
Because that's the thing. No one goes to pharmacies.
It's a 30-second loop.
No one goes to pharmacies empty-handed, though. Like, if you go into a pharmacy, you're getting something.
You're getting tissues or
weirdos
whatever.
like us go in, look at toys, and
I literally
leave.
walk in, and I go like, oh, you still only have, like, Tombstone from the Vulture Build-A-Figure wave.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing, too, is regionally I just feel like I know what, like, the 4 Marvel Legends figures are that still, like, are peg-warming here. Right? That it feels like regionally across all... locations, it's the same 4 that every location has, and then I'll hear or I'll see on like message boards and shit other people complain about like, we can't get rid of these figures, and they're figures I've never seen in person once, and then the ones that they're looking for are grails. I'm like, they're like overflowing with them. You know?
Yeah,
I feel like Tombstone we had like was
yellow,
the one for years.
We had yellow Daredevil here. I live in Maryland.
Oh, yes. Yellow Daredevil was like a pox, I feel like, upon all Walgreens. Because that was like the first, I feel like, Walgreens Marvel Legends exclusive, and
but
they
like
over-ordered
that dude
it.
was like still in the store like last week. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like he's been around for a long time.
Absolutely. And then like I feel like Walgreens exclusive since then has been understocked. Like that was the balance.
It was because like they're still waiting to sell through
they can't figure out
Daredevil.
the right number. Yeah. But yeah, I do. No, the Thrill of the Hunt's a big part of it, and I have more been ordering stuff online and placing those pre-orders. But I reluctantly have become a pre-order guy because I don't think it's as fun, but it also feels like nowadays not only is it harder to find these things in person, but the things sell out. It's like if you don't get the pre-order in, then you're fucked.
I mean, even the pre-orders,
the secondary prices are so huge, and the pre-orders fill up so fast.
Like because they, speaking of the internet, they have these bots and they have these, like AI, I guess that makes it so much more difficult for normal people or normal collectors to order. Like I'm a big G.I. Joe classified guy, as you can probably see right here.
I am so relieved I don't collect that line because that one just seems like a fucking nightmare.
It was
the stories
the worst.
I read.
It was the worst. Yeah. I love it. I love it to death. It's my favorite toy line in the last couple years.
But in terms of getting those figures, I feel like it's notorious at this point for being the worst mass market line to collect in terms of how quickly the pre-orders fill up, how bad the distribution is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Hasbro. I don't know what the deal is with Hasbro. Honestly, it's like they have they're the gargantuan, toy maker right now.
Right.
And they can't get. I mean, I guess everyone's having supply chain problems, whatever the fuck. But like, they've been having this like pre-pandemic. I remember looking for Star Wars toys, and it's impossible to find Star Wars toys. 5 years ago. It's
similar, the same thing where you're just like, I cannot go into any Walgreens without seeing Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor, and then I can't find any Black Series from the last 4 years.
Right.
They're
still in the old boxes.
Right. And then occasionally I'll like walk in and I'll see a brand new one, but it's not one I want. And it's almost more frustrating because you're like, you only have this one figure left. You must have gotten the whole wave. I now know that they're in circulation. Part of me wants to buy it just to be like, well, I know I'm never probably going to see this again.
Right.
But it's also like,
you're doing your part, get it off the shelf so that the new
right.
ones can come through, right?
Right. But I'm like, leave this for someone who's actually collecting this this
the Carl
faction
Weathers
or
from
this
the Mandalorian
subline
or something. My target is still full of him, Grief Karga, but
yeah, I don't know.
But and full is relative, right? Because there's like 3 Grief Kargas on the peg, and that's literally the entire Star Wars section at the toy store. Or
I guess
at the toy aisle.
One there's the most of here. But yeah, I feel like now I just don't see Black Series anywhere.
Yeah, it's but this is not a bitch fest. We are not here to complain about toys.
No, we're just sharing wounds before we get into the joy of the thing.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you, where did it start? Because I know that on Blank Check, or the show before it was Blank Check, where I realized your toy collecting passion was when you podcasted about this independent movie George Lucas made.
And Phantom Menace, right? It was a franchise starter that never went anywhere. Yeah.
And your obsession with Comtech chips and all of that. So the 90s, you were a teenager? Not quite a teenager?
No, I'm a little younger. So I was 10 when Phantom Menace came out.
So was that your intro to toy collecting?
No, I would say I have a very distinct memory of talking to a friend at school. So I'm in 4th grade. I'm 10. Phantom Menace is about to come out. I think what did they call it? Midnight Madness, or what was
something like that? I mean, they're called Force Fridays now. Or
now
like
they
that.
are.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember what the original, before it was a branded Hasbro thing. What the original name was that I'm just blanking on now. But I remember talking to a friend about being so excited and the leaks that had come out and what I wanted to get or whatever. And I was just monologuing to him. And I probably just went off about this for 2 minutes about how I'd been saving up my allowance for 6 months because I knew Phantom Menace was coming. I didn't want to waste money on anything else because I knew I was going to hog wild on Phantom Menace. And then I said, what do you think you're going to buy? After just 5 minutes of unbroken stream of consciousness, and he went, "You still collect action figures?" And 10. That was that was the first moment for me where I was like, "Huh, people are starting to phase out of this."
Yeah.
So you ask where it started, and it's more just the "it never stopped" thing. You know?
Yeah. I think you just came out the womb with a Luke Skywalker in your hand.
I think I just always loved toys, and I didn't shift out of it at the age where maybe I'm quote unquote supposed to.
Well, I mean, none of us did. That's why we're on this show.
I think often you talk to action figure collectors and there's maybe some dark period where they step away from it. And for a lot of people, I think it's maybe high school is where you get self-conscious about it and then you come back around to it later.
I mean, adult collecting is primarily buying back the shit you got rid of when you were in high school. Yeah.
Right. I think, I know. High school was probably the fever pitch for me. Up until pandemic, that was when it was most active for me. My parents would give me lunch money and I would not eat so that I had money left over, or I'd get the cheapest lunches strategically so I had money for a figure at the end of the week or whatever it was.
I'm just trying to picture your age and the period, because
so this is mid-2000s, I'm in high school, yeah.
But before that, right, Phantom Menace is 99, the toys are coming out, maybe late 98. And that was, the resurgence of Star Wars. 95 was Power of the Force, Power of the Force is when it came back after, a decade and a half of being away. And I also know that in the late 80s, early 90s, you had a thing for Batman. Did that also, transfer into, the Dark Knight collection or any of those, Toy Biz Batman toys from the first 89? Because I know you're really young then, but that's sweet spot for buying toys for kids.
Yes. So my mom was very overprotective. I was the first kid, and she didn't want me watching anything that was violent. So that whole wave of 90s Batman, Dark Knight, Toy Biz, X-Men, all the Marvel animated series, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, I couldn't watch any of those shows. So I coveted them. I had a Cyclops figure that I think my mother bought for me by accident or someone gifted to me. I remember from a very young age being one of the first figures I had. It was the the X-Force costume where it's the blue with the
with
big
the white
X.
Yeah.
And I think it was from that first series where he just has the light up feature. And I had that, and then a lot of the other action figures I had were the things that I feel are often notorious for being underperforming action figures because they're boys' properties that quote unquote lack conflict. And I was all in on those. So traditional action figures for whatever the big Disney movie was that year, you know? And buying, like, the comic relief characters, you know?
Yeah.
Wanting, like, Phil from Hercules, you know, or, like, Quasimodo, who doesn't fight.
Wait, did they make Quasimodo figures when Hunchback came out?
They did. That was the other thing, was it was always, like, hard to find because the majority of the Disney push would always be plush, and then secondarily it would be, like, fashion dolls.
Right.
Even when the movies were more boy-focused, I feel like that would be the hierarchy. And then third was, like, the action figures, but the action figures were always harder to find. Whichever company it would be at the time, like Mattel and Hasbro were always ping-ponging the main Disney Renaissance licenses. And I'd always be trying to find, like, the figure sets. So I remember, like, being in on those lines. I mean, Hercules had a more robust line because it was, like, more of an action figure thing. And I fucking loved Hercules. Toy Story was my biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like, Toy Story was really... If I had to pinpoint a thing where I think I went from being a kid who loved toys to more of the collector mentality, it was Toy Story, because I was like, I want all of it. Like, I need the representation of every character.
And then when Toy Story 1 came out, did they have, like... Because, you know, so many of the toys in the movie are retro toys, right? Like the Mr. Potato Head and the Slinky Dog and all that. Those are just, like, you know, old toys from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
But, like, was there, like, an in-scale Woody and Buzz, like, in 95? Because I remember, like, later in life seeing them in stores and go, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. But, like, I can't remember 95. Like, 95, I was in high school. I was a senior. I'm a little bit older than you. Yeah. My thing was Batman Forever that year. So I was more into that than... and I was still into it at the time. Because I was lucky, since I was older, I had a younger brother, and I just pretended they were for him, but they were secretly all mine.
My sister is much younger, and in high school, I sort of used that as a transition point to stay in collecting and also to go see animated movies opening weekend. Where I'm like, no, I'm buying this for her. She really wants it. And then after a week, I'm like, I'm just going to keep it in my bedroom because...
Yeah, absolutely.
But
they were around, like, the, like, in scale versions.
It's a great question. I can go deep on this answer. So it was like every company passed on Toy Story.
Yeah.
And it was both like they didn't want to license the big toys out to Pixar as characters.
Right.
So, like, them getting Mr. Potato Head was huge. And Slinky Dog at that point was kind of like, well, Slinky Dogs aren't really in production anymore. Slinky's a big thing, but there's not a character associated with it. Bo Peep was supposed to be Barbie in the first movie, but Mattel wouldn't let it happen. You know, the things they got were sort of like assorted, non-specific things without real characters tied to them. Like, oh, they got clearance for a specific Hot Wheels model or a troll in the background or whatever, but it's a lot of generic toys.
Army Men and stuff,
Right, Potato Head's the only one who really has, like, brand name association, but they really made their own character with Potato Head, and the design was different than, like, pieces that ever came with a Potato Head. Right. They had their own visuals. So at the time, every toy company passed on it, and then they went to this company, Thinkway, that was, like, fourth string, if not fifth or sixth string. And they were in, like, a real crunch because the movie was only, like, a year away. Everyone else had passed. They had very little lead time. And the story is that John Lasseter, for all of his deeply problematic, habits, was a toy collector and was very adamant about, like, you should make the toys the way they are in the movie. And Thinkway was a small enough company that they, like, took the risk and went, like, we'll have the line of action figures where every character is exactly 5 inches, regardless of how big or small they are in the movie. And they're vaguely on model and whatever. But they did a Buzz and a Woody that, at the time, for me, I was like, this is incredible. This is the most accurate replica ever. You know? Now you look at the ones that exist, not even, like, the super high-end ones, but even sort of, like, the mid-tier ones, and they're so much better. But they had them in the right size and vaguely the right materials and most of the right features. And then all the other characters were pretty much only represented in the figure line. And then the movie came out and exceeded all expectations, was like the biggest movie of its year, and they couldn't keep any of the merchandise on shelves. And the Buzz that was sort of like the screen accurate to scale Buzz figure was like the Tickle Me Elmo of that year. So then Toy Story was a thing, this thing that doesn't really happen that much anymore, where it was like, oh, there's like a second wave of merchandise for the first movie a year later. And then there's a third wave of merchandise for the first movie a year later. Like, they kept on phasing in more screen accurate stuff. So when it started out, it was like getting all the figures. And then it was like every time they finally made a ham that's a piggy bank. It's not a figure, it's a piggy bank. You know, they made the Rex I never got until, you know, when Toy Story 3 came out. That's when they really were on top of their game and had, like, you know, collector scale, high quality, feature accurate.
I mean, by then it was like Mattel was doing it by then, right? By 3
But Thinkway still had the license for, I think, out of like solidarity, because they were in the foxhole at the beginning, they would always carve out for Thinkway, and it's even extended to Toy Story 4, that they had a thing called the Toy Story Collection that was like the screen accurate, feature laden, you know, to
so
scale,
you can
right materials,
pull the string
versions.
and everything.
Right. So like that's, I'd say, the cornerstone of my Toy Story display at this point, but it's hard to limit it. And yeah, it was that collector instinct of like, well, it's now not just I want all the characters, but it's like I want them in the right scale and the right relationship to each other, with the right screen accuracy and the right features and everything, you know?
What is your relationship with the Wayne Knight character in Toy Story 2? Because, like, as a collector, right, like, he's the villain, and I see myself a lot in him, right? No, like, you can see my glass shelves and some unopened toys in there. And, you know, as a collector, like, did you feel like you were the villain of Toy Story 2? I mean, not at the time. I mean, now.
Now when I watch it, I think more I go like, well, I'm nothing like him. Like I'm like, but I would never steal a thing. You know, it's like I try to split the atom and telling myself how little I'm like him. But then there was that meme going around that 8,000 people sent me that was like, every podcast has these 3 hosts, and it was the picture of Linguini from Ratatouille, the dad from Inside Out, and Al from Toy Story 2. And I was like, that's pretty brutal. And like David, my co-host, is very much the dad from Inside Out, and Ben, I would say, is very much Linguini. From Ratatouille. Yeah. And it's like, well, I gotta be fucking Al.
Either die a hero or live long enough to become the bad guy from Toy Story.
But that's like Toy Story 2 is the same year as Phantom Menace. That's the year when I'm doubling down and going like, no, I'm not going to quit this. I'm going to keep collecting shit, you know? And there was a lot more stuff from Toy Story 2, but it still didn't feel like they were giving me the exact items I wanted. And then, I'd say my dark period where I was collecting the least was like, I dropped out of college, but what should have been my college years, like when I went off to college, I pared down my collection a lot. I gave a lot of stuff away, and stuff I now have been frantically trying to, regain. And I brought a very, I think for anyone else in my college dorms, they were like, why does this kid have so many toys? And for me, I was like, this is a very, very small collection. I had like one shelf. That was just like 10 things that meant a lot to me. And it was like my original Woody doll, the 18-inch NECA RoboCop, a Palisade scooter from Muppet Show. It was like a couple things like that were like, I picked like one thing from like 5 or 6 different lines that was like my favorite character from my favorite properties. And there was no cohesion to it, right? It was just like, these are my spirit animals or whatever. And then
and this is this is like mid-2000s?
This is late at this point. This is 2007. I'm a freshman. And then I drop out and I start working at Forbidden Planet, which is like a great comic book store here in New York City. So then I was buying some more shit because I had a really good employee discount. That store had a great discount. But I was still being very selective. I would like cherry pick. When something was just kind of undeniable. I did not go all in on lines. Early 2000s when there's the Motu reboot, which we're going to circle back to. And what's already becoming an overly long episode.
That seems to be the pattern with you, Griffin.
Yes, I stretch everything out. But like that was a line where I'm like on the hunt, going to Toys R Us after school, looking for every single figure. I want to be a completist. And by the 2000s, I'm like, look, I'm a struggling actor. I'm like taking day jobs, working retail. I can't afford to be a comprehensive collector, let alone do I have any space in my apartment. I'm sharing with 3 roommates.
Right.
To really have a display. So yeah, it was like it grew a little bit then, and then for years after that, it was like I'd keep the tabs on everything. I was checking the toy news sites every day, but I probably only buy a couple things.
Were you a Toy Fair subscriber?
Oh, hardcore. That
I wrote
favorite.
for Toy Fair.
Did you really?
I was a contributing writer. I have a bunch of my issues in a binder back here somewhere. But
man, that's another thing where I had every single issue in my closet. Like, and I threw them all out when...
Yeah.
I don't even think when I went to college, but it was like my parents gave up my childhood apartment a couple years ago, and I was just like, well, I want to keep all of these if they're not in my home and I can go back and look at them anytime.
Yeah.
Once I have to move them someplace else,
yeah, it's a lot. They're heavy.
I will painfully throw them out. That's crazy. What are some of like what did you write? Were you on specific beats or?
Yeah. So I interviewed Jesse Falcon a bunch of times from when like Marvel Legends launched.
I mean, not to sidetrack here, but like I grew up in the city and I was a big like comedy nerd on top of being like a big comics action figure nerd. And because I wasn't allowed to, I know I asked you a question that immediately derailed you.
It's all good.
But I want to hear your answer. But before I forget, Jesse Falcon was in charge of Toy Biz, which was the action figure company that weirdly owned Marvel and did all the Marvel toys, which in the mid-2000s, the Marvel Legends line was like inarguably better than anything else that was being done in the mass market.
The articulation, they were the first ones to really bring it with articulation
just, like,
and
paint
posability.
And sculpt and the amount of value you were getting, and the bases were so
those
insane.
Giant-ass clamshell packages.
Right. They were just like
you couldn't open them with
the best. So I'm reading Toy Fair all the time, and Jesse Falcon feels like a celebrity to me.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm doing on weekend nights, rather than going to parties, it's like I'm spending every like after school weekday afternoon hunting for action figures. And then on the weekends, rather than go to parties, my friends and I would go to, my nerdy friends would go to the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York City, where it was like improv and sketch comedy and whatever. And then at some point, I kept on going like, why is this one performer look so familiar? And I realized he was Jesse Falcon.
Oh, really?
Who moonlighted. He was like one of the best improvisers I've ever
I didn't
seen.
know that.
But that was like his moonlighting. I mean, I don't think he does it anymore, but he was part of what, from my mind, it was my favorite improv team called Mother. And Jason Mantzoukas was on that as well. A lot of great people. Jessica St. Clair. Yeah. So like he was like a double celebrity for me, where I would like read the Toy Fair interviews and I'd be like, this guy is the biggest name in action figures.
Yeah.
And then I would see him on Saturday nights. I'd be like, this guy's the biggest name in improv. And it was like a guy who's not a celebrity to anyone else. Like he's doing these two niche things and they're just sort of like for the joy of it. And I like idolized him. I thought he was the coolest fucking guy in the world.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I did whatever my editors told me to do, but I did a couple pieces. Some of them were cover stories. I was never like a staff writer. I never had to move to Congers. But I did contribute. The coolest thing I ever did for them was meet my idol. I mentioned I'm a G.I. Joe fan, and Larry Hama. I was able to meet him because of Toy Fair, and like in the 20 years since we've become friends. But like that blew my fucking mind because I was like G.I. Joe was foundational for me as a kid, and like. Yeah. As an Asian American too, like to find out that like the guy who created like the real American hero was a Japanese American guy.
It's huge.
Who was also like a jack of all trades, like Jesse apparently, who was an actor and a musician.
Right. A similarly fascinating guy.
Absolutely.
So I know I'm jumping all around here in chronology.
Hey, it's perfect. This is why this show exists.
One of the things I did in my struggling actor years. Although I'm still a struggling actor, but when I was really struggling and no one would hire me and didn't have a podcast, no one knew who I was and whatever, and I was sort of like freelancing and picking up whatever jobs I could, I was freelance for a thing called Champion magazine that went under almost as soon as it started. That was a lot of the expats from Wizard after that shut down.
Yeah.
So this is the early 2010s, late 2000s, because I think both Wizard and Toy Fair stopped publishing in maybe 2000, like 2010 or 2011.
Yeah, I want to say like 2000. I probably think the last issue came out of both magazines in like 2012, maybe.
Yeah. But from the ashes of that, so I guess
No, you're right. 2011, because I think Green Lantern was the last thing they ever put on their cover.
Yes, that sounds right. So, 2012, it was like Howard Stern and someone who produces his shows, a big collector, had infused money into getting a bunch of the Wizard people to try to do a new iteration of that, but for iPads only, because everyone thought the future was going to be like interactive digital magazines, but they didn't have the money to hire a staff, so it was like me and like 4 friends were freelancing and writing so much shit for them.
Wow.
And almost none of it ever got published. But the thing I did get out of it was the first time I ever got to go to San Diego Comic-Con, it was because I got a press pass from them.
Oh, wow.
And by the time the convention happened, this was 2012, by the time the convention happened, I think the magazine had gone under. But I was able to book interviews and like roundtable interview Mark Hamill or Stan Lee, or then get like one-on-one interviews with people I really loved who were less huge at the time, like Jeff Lemire, who's like my favorite comic book writer and shit, and like sit there with my fucking iPhone and pretend I was interviewing them from a serious publication, and just knowing like, first of all, they haven't paid me for the last 10 things that I've written. The last 3 issues have not come out.
Did they book your flight at least, or did you have to fly yourself out to San Diego?
I flew myself, and I had a friend from Twitter. I mean, this is like early days of Twitter.
When you can trust people on Twitter to like shack you up.
Right. And I had a friend who had like a joint custody of her daughter, and her daughter was going to be with her dad for the weekend. And I stayed in the little girl's bedroom in a bed that was too small even for me. And flew myself out to San Diego and had all these interviews and shit. But yeah, no, like Toy Fair was super huge for me. I think especially in that transitional period of like, I'm going to stick with this, I'm going to stay a collector. The fact that it was like a magazine written by adults who were self-deprecating.
Yeah.
It had a sense of humor, which felt in line with me. It was like sort of representing the comedy. And I increasingly found out how many Toy Fair people, I mean, obviously a lot of the Toy Fair people went on to do
like Robot Chicken, right.
But there were other people who would freelance for Toy Fair who I would then find out were like improvisers in New York City.
Yeah.
But yes, anyway, I don't know. Full circle back to all of this. My dark period was, early 20s to mid 20s. And then when I started getting like more work, the collection started getting...
What brought you back? What was the thing that was like, I'm going to start collecting that again?
I mean, it truly, I think, was like... It was resources, right? There was like 2013 or 14, I booked like a couple big jobs in a row, none of which panned out as they were expected to, but I like had actual sort of like paychecks as an actor for the first time. And it was nothing huge, but I had been living like so hand to mouth off of dollar pizza and whatever, because I was like committed to proving I wasn't an idiot for dropping out of college to do stand-up and audition and shit, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, the way I can justify that is I need to be able to live off of no money whatsoever.
Right.
And my only luxury purchase is going to the movies all the time. And I might buy one action figure a year. And then I remember I booked like a network sitcom pilot that didn't go. And then right after that, I booked this movie, Draft Day.
Yep.
And those were like the 2 biggest jobs I'd gotten. And I had a little disposable income for like the first time in whatever it had been, 5 or 6 years. And I remember doing the like multi-big bad toy store pre-order of just like, there are like 4 items. I was in this hotel room in Cleveland, or not even Cleveland, Beachwater, Ohio, which was the suburb outside of Cleveland where we shot Draft Day. And it was like,
so you're making your orders like while you're filming the movie.
Correct. So like I start filming the movie, the sitcom pilot gets passed on. So I was like very depressed about the fact that I thought I was going from like sitcom pilot to then filming a movie to then starting a season of a TV show.
Right. Big budget Kevin Costner movie.
Right. So there was like online retail therapy of... As much as I'm still in the pocket, like filming a movie on a day-to-day basis, I'm depressed about the fact that the show didn't get picked up. So I'm trying to think what the items were. The one I remember distinctly was the NECA Spider Gremlin, because that had been like, I collected when they had done the Gremlins figures, whenever that was, in like 2003, and then there was that long gap before they brought them back. That coincided with the years where I couldn't afford figures that much.
Which is convenient for you.
Very convenient. But it had always been like the Spider Gremlin was supposed to be part of that original line in 2003 or 2004. They were like, we're going to do a box set with the Spider Gremlin and Gizmo and the Gremlin, the Rambo gear. And Gremlins 2 is one of like my favorite movies ever. And I even remember, I'm darting all over the place here, but it was like when I worked at Forbidden Planet, I was up for a big comic book movie, and I kept on like waiting every day for the call that I would get the job, which I didn't. But like my thought was that the way I would quit was like, I get the fucking call, you got the job, you've made it, kid, and then I would go buy the like expensive $300 sideshow RoboCop statue that they had there, like now I can afford the higher end collectibles I couldn't afford. So I think there was a version of that like in this hotel room in the suburbs of Ohio. It was maybe like the 18-inch Michael Keaton Batman, Gremlins figure. But even before that, actually, when I had gotten the part in the sitcom pilot, and my best friend, who we grew up like collecting action figures together, we were like the two people who stuck with it throughout high school, right? And both of us, had been roommates. We weren't roommates at this point in time. When I got the part, I was like, you know what I'm doing to celebrate? We're going to Toys R Us, and I'm doing my like big shopping cart challenge.
Right. You just start pulling
that
boxes.
Was my thing. I was like, I'm gonna celebrate by going to Toys R Us with a cart and not checking the price on anything. And it's not like I had made that much money, but the amount of money I was getting paid for this pilot felt like astronomical to me after doing like College Humor videos for years or whatever. And so I like put all this shit in the cart, and then still somehow the total ended up being like under $200.
Because you realize like action figures are like, even back, especially back then, were like $12, $15 a pop, right?
Right. So I was just getting a lot of stuff then, and then when I'm in Ohio, I'm starting to pre-order a lot of stuff off of Big Bad, and then from that moment on, I'm back in. The floodgates are open,
and then I nonstop,
think when I got the tick, and then I had like more consistent income at a higher level. That was like when I started going back and filling in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, which was like had started with subscription only online at the point in time.
Maddie Collector.
I can't afford it. But at the time that the tick got picked up, Maddie Collector had gone under, and suddenly all those figures were getting clearanced.
Oh, right.
And beyond even getting clearanced, it was like you could go on eBay and get a lot of like 10 figures for like $80. And now like the cheapest figures are $80.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the prices
I had forgotten
on
that
that
line
line have
about
gone through the roof.
Because I know Super 7 was like I remember when it moved to Super 7, I was like, why are they so fucking expensive? But
it was a transitional moment.
Yeah.
Right. Where even like the Maddie Collector store was doing like blowout prices on figures that they had claimed were sold out years earlier.
You know what?
Suddenly they found this stock, and then other retailers were getting them. You could literally get like these figures for $7.
No, you're absolutely right. What I had forgotten is like in that period, I actually ordered Castle Grayskull. The classics one.
Right.
And which
at the time cost like $180, and you were like, how is it possible that anything can cost this much?
Yeah, but
now we live in this era where like the Thunder tank is $8,000.
Yeah, the HasLab and all that stuff. But it was like, it was clearance for like under $100, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I just ordered it like without thinking, and then it arrived a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
And there was this massive fucking box.
Right. Where do I put this?
And I was like, what the fuck am I going to do?
Right.
I immediately sold it the next day. I was like, I can't do anything with this.
But also, like, if you had held on to it, you could have...
I could have waited and then, like, made
it would have covered a mortgage.
I could have, like, sent my daughter to college. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But yes, that was, I think, another throttle point for me, where it was, like, being able to so quickly and cheaply, in that one, like, 9-month window where this was possible, fill in most of that line. And all these figures I'd always coveted and gone, like... that looks so cool. I love He-Man. I was looking at that line like adoringly from a distance.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, now I have a full shelf of just classics. You know?
This is a perfect segue point, actually, because I wanted to ask you about your Masters of the Universe kind of backstory, because, you know, knowing, of course, you're Orko. Like you're making a career out of being the tiny sidekick to large men. You were the Arthur, the Peter Seraphim, which is
my favorite
Tick.
Things that I grew up doing. Yeah, you're a tiny flying.
Anxious. Yeah, Watto to Connor Ratliff's George Lucas. Right. You were Griffin to David Sims's Griffin.
Yes,
blank check. So like
4 very similar characters,
and they're all very large men. And now you're Orko to Chris Wood's He-Man. Where did the He-Man love come from? Because, you know, as you said, you know, you came much after the original He-Man. Was it the reboot, the 20X reboot?
I went to sleepaway camp, and there was an older kid. He was a counselor in training.
You might have told the story on Fat Man, I think, right?
I think I did. Whose name was Grunge, and his 2 favorite things in the world were Kevin Smith and He-Man. And I was reading Toy Fair all the time, so He-Man would always come up, and I was like kind of confused by it, because every other 80s toy line of that stature still existed in some form at the time I was collecting. You know, like there's some version of G.I. Joe. There's some version of Transformers. Like all the other things at that level, you know? And even like Thundercats was dead, but I felt like Thundercats had
even that
little
was coming
more
back.
cultural omnipresence than He-Man did, where I was like, where did this disappear to? How could something have been this dominant in the 80s and I don't know what it is? It doesn't air in reruns, you know? Because that was also an era where, like, when I'm growing up, there's not that much animation, where 80s cartoons are still getting rerun all the time, you know? And it felt like Motu was just kind of memory hold. So reading Toy Fair was the first time I had exposure to it. And then this kid Grunge, who I, like, idolized, who was a teenager, made some He-Man reference, and I was like, what is He-Man? I'm trying to figure this out. Can you give me the answers? And he literally, he dressed like Silent Bob in the middle of the summer. He wore like a big trench coat and a backwards cap and a baseball cap, and carried a really heavy backpack. And his backpack was like Mary Poppins.
Literally everything in it.
Right, why are you carrying this with you on a daily basis? But he said, like, I've been waiting for someone to ask me this question. He turned around, he opened up the backpack, and he had like a He-Man like little golden book, like a storybook, like a picture book about the origins of He-Man to explain it to me. And then I got really into it. And that summer, I think, coincides with when they did that like 20th anniversary line of reissues. So it was starting to get back out there again, and then the next summer is the reboot. So they were putting the VHS tapes out that came bundled with the figures.
Oh, right. I forgot about
those
that.
Were like the harder ones to find. Like they were sometimes retailer exclusive, or you'd have to find them at like a convention or whatever. Because I don't know, maybe they were Walmart exclusives, which we didn't have in the city. But I was like watching the old show through those tapes, not collecting the vintage reissues as much, but getting amped for the revival and being like, oh, now there's like a new version of He-Man that I get to live through.
Yeah.
So I was at this point like 13 or 14 and all in. As I said, like hunting for the figures, watching the show every week, collecting the comics, all of that was like super in on it. And then, I was like bummed that I wasn't in on the classics line, you know?
Yeah.
That I sort of had to skip over it. So like getting back into classics was a bit of a reactivation point for me, because I had been cherry picking so much, trying to keep bumpers on my collecting tendencies up until that point. And when I was getting all the discount classics figures, it's like I'm back into being a guy who collects lines.
Yeah.
And maybe not a completist, but like I want to show.
And that's the thing too. Like it's a lot of these lines, especially nowadays. It's hard to be a completist just because there's so much, right? Like I have a friend that when I was growing up, he was much older than me, but he like collected. If it was Batman, he would collect it. It didn't matter what it was. If it was toothpaste to whatever, right? And like and I always want to like check in on him today because there's just so much Batman shit in the last 30 years. Like, how are you even keeping up with that?
I know.
McFarlane is like literally releasing 7 new Batman figures like every week. It's crazy.
It's insane. It's insane. I mean, that's another thing, jumping all over again in the timeline, but talking about like 99 between Phantom Menace and Toy Story 2 being the year that sort of like kept me from dropping collecting as a kid, like deciding to carry that over into my teen years. The other factor there is that like that's peak McFarlane.
Yeah.
Like at this time where I'm still buying 2 like mass market lines for like big kid driven movies that are coming out, I'm also now at the age where I'm like, oh fuck, McFarlane's making Austin Powers figures and Sleepy Hollow, you know, like as I'm getting into
figure.
Right, slightly edgier films, I'm also getting into slightly edgier action figures. So I was like,
I think it's a stretch to call those
kid.
McFarlane toys action figures, but you know, like
at that time, yeah.
they have to move to be an action figure.
It's an attitude. Was that their old tagline?
Something like that. It was, But what I love about your Masters fandom is that when they announced Kevin Smith was doing another version of Masters of the Universe, you lobbied online to play Orko. Like, I remember the tweet, like, please let me be Orko. And here you are a couple years later, you are Orko on Masters of the Universe. Like, what has that been like for you? Like, that's probably, is that the first time? I mean, I guess Arthur was
Arthur was that too.
But like,
Arthur was that too.
But you're 2 for 2 in a way.
Yes. Yeah. No, I do feel that way, and I still feel like pinch me about it. It doesn't. It's weird. In both of those cases, I have a hard time not processing it as like a fan film because I'm in it, if that makes any sense. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, the mere fact that I'm playing this character means it can't actually count. This isn't like legitimate, you know? And then I watch the rest of it. It's easier for me to swallow with Revelation because my face isn't on screen. Whereas like when I watch the Tick, every time I come on screen, I'm just pulled out of it where I'm like, well, this isn't real, you know? And then it is when like someone like you says like, you are Orko, that I go like, fuck, right, I am Orko, you know?
Yeah.
At least conditionally within that one series at the times that they hire me to do the sessions or whatever. But like,
but as you know, as a fan though, like once you're the character, like Peter Cullen is always going to be Optimus Prime. As much as he probably is like, you know, I don't want to be Optimus Prime anymore. It's like, too bad, you're still going to be Optimus Prime. You're going to be Orko for time immemorial.
Yeah, and I feel a certain... I'm very much someone who has come around to feeling... letting go of any preciousness and protectiveness I feel over the franchises I like, where I'm just like, look, we're in a time where these things are going to get rebooted over and over and over again, right? And so to a certain degree, it relieves me of the stress of how do I possibly live up to the guy who did it first, right? Like, how am I going to be a better Arthur than the cartoon Arthur, let alone David Burke Arthur?
Right,
you know?
right.
And the same thing with Orko, where it's like, well, if I'm doing Orko, it's never going to sound right to me, no matter how hard I try, because Orko is the Lou Scheimer Orko. And then Gabe Kuth did an incredible job, like, after that, and I'm always going to sound like sloppy thirds. But I'm also like, there's already been another Orko since me, right? They have two simultaneous shows. Right, but, so, like, Tom Kenny's doing that Orko, and I'm like, you know, inevitably someone else will play Arthur, and I don't feel protectiveness over it because the protectiveness I feel over is having my chance to do my version of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well,
right?
and I mean,
so it's like I free myself from the confines of being like, you have to live up to what the original guy did. But I also free myself outside of like, I want to be able to feel like I could take some chances in doing this because I have no illusions of thinking that I need to be the definitive guy.
Well, and I think and this is no shade to the other voice actors who've played Orko over the this sounds like Orko is this kind of like, you know, has so much gravitas, but
to me he was.
Well,
yeah,
I was going to say that like no shade to the other guys, but like the Orko that you play and the Orko that Kevin's team, you know, Dia and Mark and Eric and all those guys that they wrote was like an Orko unlike the others in that like there was so much interiority to him, there was so much emotion. Like when you see, and you know, spoilers if you haven't watched Revelation yet, like when you see him in his like, you know, depleted self, like there's pain.
Yeah.
Like Orko never felt pain in the Filmation cartoon.
No.
And then the ultimate sacrifice that he makes is like, I cried watching that episode. And your performance, like you made Orko make me cry.
Explicit goal. I cannot tell you how many times we'd be recording.
I'm sure Kevin cried like every time. Right?
No, but not even that. We'd be recording. We'd be like, I hope some fuckers cry at this. Like we just were like, right? Because it would just be like, how great would it be if you could make people care that much about Orko, who's always been so silly, and like I loved him. I mean,
but Orko was the Jar Jar, right? Like because older fans hated it.
This is what I always said, because now I feel like fandom's gotten so intense, and He-Man fandom's gotten weirdly intense in the last year.
Yeah,
and
probably in the last 6 months, but yeah,
right. And Kevin made some comments about like the fact that no one ever liked Orko, and then people threw that against him as like, well, this is proof he's not a fan. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I was on those message boards in the early 2000s, right? Like I was on fucking He-Man.org.
Yeah,
I was collecting these figures. I was watching VHSs of Filmation. I was buying those season sets when it came out. I was watching the new show. I was collecting all the figures. At best, Orko was always a highly divisive character. I'm not arguing that no one ever liked him, but you'd go on these boards, and I would say the way I said it to Kevin was like, half the people think he's Jar Jar and half the people think he's C-3PO. Right? Like half the people go like, well, the point is he's kind of the annoying character who causes the problems, but I love him. I find him endearing. I find him funny. Yeah. He's essential. And other people would go like, Orko drags the whole thing down. He makes the thing less serious. I find him annoying. And I do think it's maybe a little bit of a shift of like what age you were when you started watching.
100%.
If you're 6 versus 8 or whatever it is. But yes, I think Orko was always divisive, and people either really loved him or they really hated him, and he was like nails on a chalkboard. I always loved him, and I think it's like my favorite character maybe in all of everything is Fozzie Bear. Mm-hmm. Like I just think Fozzie Bear is the best, and so much of what I loved about Fozzie Bear was the weird balance of like his confidence versus his absolute self-loathing. You know, that he would just every time think that he was going to go out there and kill. And Kermit and everyone would warn him, like, Fozzie, don't do this bit. It's not going to work. And he'd be like, this is it. This is the one that's going to work. And then he'd go out there and it would immediately bomb. Immediately Statler and Waldorf would start giving him the business. And he'd just sort of go like, come on, guys, please. I'm trying really hard. And it was the fact that, like, the shield would fall down so quickly. And you're watching this guy struggle to continue the bit that has already catastrophically failed, that he's being razzed for. I always just, as a kid, thought was the funniest thing in the world. And Arthur and Orko, I think, both have that same quality, where it's like they cannot hide the fact that they are perhaps both overwhelmed and ill-prepared, but they continue to place themselves in the line of danger. They continue to put themselves on the front lines. And you almost have to go like, why do you keep subjecting yourself to this, right? Like Arthur is like such all-consuming anxiety. Yeah. And, you know, just seems so panicked all the time. And when I got the chance to audition for the Tick, and never thought I was going to get the part. Like, never, ever thought I was going to get the part. And it was a real uphill battle because I think they wanted someone who had been the star of a TV show before, you know, to not only be a co-lead, but Arthur, on this show where Arthur is more of a focus.
You're I was about to say, you're the lead. Yeah. Like, you're the main guy. I mean, you're the POV character. Like, the show is told through Arthur's perspective.
I think Tick and Arthur were co-leads, but Arthur is the protagonist in terms of him moving the story along, being the POV and everything like that, as you said. Yeah, so that was, my thing was, I always, as a kid, related to Arthur really strongly because he couldn't hide the fact that he was scared. And I was, and still am, such a generally anxious person, right? And there was a bravery to the vulnerability in my eyes that, like, everyone else is putting on a big show and pretending that they're ready for this fight. And it's somehow even braver to show up and be like, I am not ready for this fight, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. You know? And same with Fozzie and same with Orko. Like, every episode would almost always start on Motu with, like, Orko proudly presenting a new magic trick for the palace.
And then fucking up, like, everything.
And then Randor and Marlena just go, like, what the fuck are you doing, Orko? And then it's like, that's how the episode starts, and it ends with him demanding that he follow He-Man into battle, you know? So I think with Arthur, reading that script, because I got to read the whole episode. I know this is a long-winded answer, but I promise I'm going to bring this home. I got to read the Tick pilot before I auditioned. You don't always get to read the whole episode before you're going in for a thing, right? Let alone you never get to read the whole season. So you don't know exactly what's in store. But I saw how much the show was sort of centralizing Arthur and really investing in, like, his mental illness, you know, and not using him as just sort of like a comedic archetype of a worrywart or a panic neurotic or whatever.
Which it kind of was in the original, especially.
Which I think, because the show, I think to Ben Edlund's own admission, like, Tick had always been more of a parody. Yeah. You know, and you're sort of just subverting things, and his whole thing with the version of the Tick that we did, the Amazon version, was like, the Tick's a really rare, if not completely unique example of, like, a property that's been rebooted multiple times, but always by the original creator. Yeah. It's the same guy every time rebooting the thing. And it's because Ben is so, he has such an active mind that he always has some new idea of how to completely reconceptualize the thing, view it from a different prism, put it into a different genre, a different medium, or whatever it is. And his whole thing was like, is it possible to make a version of the Tick where you actually care about the characters? You know, where we add dimensionality to these characters that have always been pretty ridiculous.
I mean, I think that's what Arthur shares with Orko as well. And maybe that's where you were circling back to, is that in both situations, there's these like 80s properties of like the annoying sidekick. Correct. That you are given the opportunity, at least, to add some humanity to.
Right. So I felt this very deep investment in, like, I think I might know how to add some more depth to Arthur. And it was like a real uphill battle to convince the studio to hire me, because I was just sort of unproven. But then once I had done that, anytime there were rumors, and it was mostly about live action Masters movie, which every 2 years gets reannounced and then shut down. I feel like anytime they would announce it, I would tweet like, I want to play Orko. Right. Because I just sort of felt like, not like, oh, I'm feeling hot on myself after Arthur, but I was just like, I had this whole conceptualization of how to deepen this character that people used to find annoying, and it worked to some degree. They let me do it, and people responded to it. Orko would be a fun target to try to do that with next. And there, as I've given this very long-winded answer to the point of, there are a lot of similarities there and overlaps. So that was the thing that I thought would be a fun challenge. All that having been said, I auditioned not reading scripts. So my goal was, can I do something that is very much in line with classic Orko? I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I want it to sound similar, feel similar, have the good vibe without being a direct impression. Evoke it as much as I can, but then hopefully add a little more depth to it so that and this is no strike against the guys who played him in the past. Right. Different shows, you know, there wasn't room to deepen the character. But I didn't know until I got the part and received the scripts, like, holy shit, they're gonna let Orko do this? Yeah. Like, then it was just like, okay, now I really have to bring it, because my hope was, can I add a little more depth to one-liners? And it's like, Orko's going to sacrifice himself. He has this emotional death. You see him in multiple states. I mean, just in the first half of the season, I essentially had to play...
You played, like, Filmation Orko in the first episode. You were essentially playing, like... You know,
there
are
the Lou
3
Scheimer. Different Orkos. Yeah, that I had to sort of develop independently, where it's first episode, it was like, this is as close as I can get to evoking the feeling of Filmation and going sort of like full Saturday morning kid show in terms of delivery rhythms and jokes and all of that. And then he's going to disappear. He's going to come back, and he's going to be like husk of Orko, like sad, broken, weakened Orko. And then he has to come back to this place of power and peace and serenity in himself. Like,
or even the scene you share with Lena as Evil Lynn, like the conversations you have, like that's Orko never has conversations like that with any character, right?
Right. I think the scene with I think it's him and Andra on the boat where he's talking about journaling so that you never forget the adventures and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's like, all this stuff. And it was the same thing with Arthur, where every time I'd get a script, I'd just go like, I am so fucking lucky that I get to play this, because here are these characters that I've always projected this additional depth onto, I think because I related to them so hard as a kid, right? And I felt this deeper emotional investment into things that were perhaps deeply subtextual and were never verbalized on the show. And the fact that I get to be the person who gets to like play the scenes where these things come to the forefront for the first time, I feel like very, very spoiled in both of those characters. So in both cases, it's just like, well, it's exciting that the way the writers have conceptualized this matches up with what I always would have wanted to do with these characters. But it also then becomes the pressure of, I really have to bring it. Yeah. And I think, the intention was originally that they were going to do the sort of Filmation voice filters on my performance.
But that's you 100%, right?
That's me 100% without any post, which is a real point of pride for me. But I think another aspect of it was that, because I kept on saying, like, guys, you don't have to do this to stroke my ego. Like, put filters on. I'd rather it sounds good, right? And when I auditioned, I did it two ways. I was sending in tapes with me doing the voice myself as close as I could get, which I think I got better later. But that was the best I could do, only a couple days prep. And then I did some takes where I adjusted it myself. I pitched it up. And I said, like, I'm just giving you the options. I could do either. And then I got the part, and then there were maybe 3 months between when I got the part and when I started recording. And I literally would just work on it, like, almost every night in the bathroom mirror. Just working on, like, pitching my voice up and finding the intonations and breaking it down and what are the elements I'm missing and playing it back and trying to get as close as I could so that when I went in for the first record, I went, this is what I've been working on. Because the thing you find is that in order to make the voice sound right after they pitch it up, you have to in real time deliver it even less like Orko.
Yeah.
You have to be pretty flat.
Because I'm pretty sure Lou Scheimer's original voice is nothing like what Orko sounds.
Right, and the reason they put all these filters on Orko is because Lou Scheimer played 87 characters on the original show to save money in the budget, right? So it's like I was trying to reverse engineer, like, what was Lou speaking like that then got filtered through to this end Orko result, which was sort of means to an end, right? But I said to them, like, look, if this works for you, I can do this live. If not, I can say these lines in my own voice, and you can pitch them up later.
Who knew those silly blank check ad read voices you've been doing over the years would come in handy?
Keith, I think that's the only reason I was able to get this part, is I had, like, 3 years of, like, weird wax on, wax off. I didn't even realize this was prep for this kind of thing. Checky helped me a lot. But yes, and then, I think the thing they found, they went, that's pretty good, maybe we only have to adjust it a little bit. And the thing that they found is when they put the filters on it, it lost some of the nuance in between the different phases of the characters. So I know when some people, I've been very, very flattered by how much I think most of the fandom has received the Orko section, at least of the show. We don't care about
the other ones. Don't worry about the other ones.
But I see people sometimes going like, why didn't they put the filters through it? And it's like, because when you put the filters on it, and I was not creatively against it, and you're getting to a point where Orko is like near death.
Yeah. It would be weird.
You lose a little nuance of emotionality.
That's a weird nitpick. They didn't use filters on Orko's voice.
Get it.
Come on.
I get it. No, I get it, because it's like you want the things to sound right. But it was weird needles to thread, because it's like he needs to sound like Filmation Orko the entire time, but it has to be varying levels of fidelity to Filmation Orko.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Arthur unfortunately never got in your Amazon journey was an action figure. However, however,
I have right here, right next to me, what is the closest, which is, pull this off my couch. I didn't even place this here. It's just here. But the David Burke, the Patrick Warburton series. Arthur. I had all the Arthurs. I still have all the Arthurs that were made across the various lines.
But they never made Amazon figures.
No, it drove me crazy.
Fortunately,
bane of my existence.
I know. Fortunately, though, Mattel revealed a few weeks ago, there is a Savage He-Man 2-pack. First of all, spoiling the second half of.
I know.
This was before the trailer came out. Spoiling the second half of the season, which is what they did, fits because before the part 1 came out, they released Skelegod into the world, and I was like, Skelegod? What? And
I don't mean to speak ill of the people who employ me, but there are certain Mattel decisions like that I find a little bit confusing.
So anyway, there is a 2-pack of Savage He-Man and Orko.
Yes.
So this whole conversation has been about you being a toy collector.
Right.
Now you finally have a toy of your own. What does that feel like?
I mean, I don't have it in my hands yet, and I don't know how real it's going to feel to me until I do. Because with Tick, there were a lot of promises unfulfilled. There were things I was constantly told were going to happen. There was even a point where it's not anymore because now I replaced it with Orko, but it was my my profile picture and all my social media channels for so long was Arthur. The head sculpt for what was supposed to be a high-end, 12-inch Arthur figure that I had that thing that I've been dreaming of my entire life. That's like my manager reaching out to me and going like, here are the JPEGs for your approval. Do you have any notes you want to make on your likeness? And I was just like, yes, here we go. And like the company went under, the show got canceled, Funko never made any characters other than the Tick. Like the whole dream collapsed, you know? And so I get Orko, and I'm, the most exciting part of it for me is I get to play Orko, but also I'm like, but come on, the show's produced by Mattel. It's based on a toy. Like, how do I not... Come on. And like to go through multiple waves of Masterverse reveals where there was no Orko figure, I have been haranguing the Mattel people for like over a year now. Just saying like, it's happening, right? It's definitely happening. And they'd be cagey with me, or they'd shift plans or whatever. And I knew for a little while that that's where it sounded like things were settling. I mean, it's part of the issue with Orko where like, he's a unique sculpt character, whereas everyone else in He-Man pretty much shares one of 3 body types.
No reuse for Orko. That's why he's essentially a glorified accessory to Savage He-Man.
Right. And then that was the other thing they said was like, he's too small to sell by himself in this scale, so we're going to put him in a deluxe pack, but we haven't figured out which yet. And then him ending up... I know everyone's projecting that there's some spoiler in the fact that he's in the pack with Savage He-Man, but that I think is a pretty arbitrary pairing.
Well, until they gave you the stinger in the trailer, and it's like, I guess Griffin's coming back for part 2.
I have no idea what you're talking about. But there was that at one point.
Am I going to be in trouble, is what you're saying?
No, I don't know. They put that in the trailer. I was surprised they put that in the trailer. I was surprised they announced that action figure. I mean, that was the other thing. I kept on going, like, because I was at PowerCon this year, the He-Man convention, and they did a panel, and they announced, like, the next wave of figures and put them in the glass case. And I was like, I've been told that I'm part of, like, Deluxe Wave 3.
Right.
And the other 2 deluxe figures are Trapjaw and Triclops. And the third is Savage He-Man with Orko. And why is that the one that they aren't showing? And they were like, we're not showing it because it's a spoiler, Savage He-Man. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to sit tight and it won't be revealed until after the season comes out. And then they just decided a month later to reveal it. So I don't know. I don't get the strategy. Way above my pay grade. I'm so happy it's out there. I didn't get to see it until like the night before they revealed it. They kept on telling me it was happening. And then I've been so outspoken on Twitter and stuff about my eagerness to be an action figure that like several different action figure bloggers and journalists all reached out to me and were like, has anyone slipped you these photos yet? And they were like, they're embargoed, we're not supposed to post them until tomorrow, but want to make sure you knew.
Yeah.
So I was just like fist pumping, victory lap, but yeah, I don't know, I guess early next year I'm supposed to get it if supply chain
I can't believe they don't give you an early prototype sample at the very least, but
I think they're gonna send me a box. I will say Mattel's actually been very good about that. They've been hooking me up. I feel like Amazon, I mean, there wasn't as much produced Tick merchandise, but there was a lot of like promo stuff that they made, and I always had to harangue them for it and be like, I'm a collector, please give me all of these things. You know, the stuff they send out to press or to give away at conventions or whatever. I was just like, I want all of it. I want every item. Mattel's been like very proactive, and all the other companies that have been, I mean, FYE has done a lot of Revelation stuff, and they gave me a bunch of stuff. Like, I finally feel like I've gotten to that point where I have enough standing within the show and also have built up enough of a reputation for being a collector that these companies know to reach out to me and go like, you'd want this, right?
That's like that's the like platonic ideal, I think, of being an actor in your like genre, right? Is that like You get first dibs.
It's the best.
All the stuff.
Yeah. I've been getting not all of, but the vast majority of the Revelation stuff and the Masterverse figures so far. But I'm just waiting for when it's me.
Yeah.
And when it's ideally like just a box full of me, because I'm at the age where increasingly my friends are having kids, and like that's just going to be multiple years of presents for everybody.
Everyone gets an Orko.
Everyone gets an Orko.
Is
I
there
need
a little
to
bit of a
indoctrinate all my friends'
disappointment
kids.
that, you know, like at least Arthur was going to have your likeness, but like, is there like at least, you know, like, you know, you were saying the performance is easier to handle when you don't see your face, but like, in toy form, you kind of want to see yourself, right?
Yeah. I would not say I'm disappointed that the Orko doesn't look like me. I still feel the same exact amount of pride over it. I think there's like, there's a surreal aspect to a thing that looks like you know?
Yeah.
That doesn't make it more valuable, but that makes it sort of more unreal, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I have the pictures to go off of what the Arthur would have looked like.
Well, and the thing, too, is that, like, even the show is long gone and dead.
Yeah.
Like, as we were talking about NECA earlier, like, the toy companies that are around now put out the most obscure shit. Who knows? Like,
I know.
There may be
know.
some tick action, because it's still a popular show, even though it's not, you know, making new episodes anymore. I know that there is a hardcore fan base for the tick, and I feel like the fan base for the tick is similar and overlaps with like toy collectors that would buy the shit out of 7-inch NECA tick figures, for example.
What my dream is right now, my dream is like that, either like NECA or Super 7, ideally. Although, I'd be happy if it was any company. But in my nerd heart, right, yeah, sure, if it's Thinkway. But like the way that like NECA and Super 7 are treating Ninja Turtles, and now extending to other stuff like Gargoyles and Silverhawks and whatever, doing like classic cartoon or comic book tick figures in that way.
Yeah.
Because just as a collector, I would love, like, we have the old Bandai toys, and even just in terms of classic canonical tick, you know, in his most like iconic sort of visual
drawn form,
right. I'd love like super articulated modern standard tick and Arthur and Captain Liberty and Deflator Mouse and Chairface and all that sort of stuff. And then my dream is, if those were successful enough in the way we've seen, right, because like, NECA's now doing Turtles movies and cartoon and video games and whatever.
Well, and then
I'm like,
you know, NECA, I think of their boys figures, and it's like, you know, they could have been doing tick figures if they're doing boys figures.
Keith,
I know.
It drives me insane. No, because I do feel like boys is like all my dream was that NECA would do tick, right? Like that was like in my mind's eye the company I wanted, in like the exact sort of like scale and articulation points and everything that they're doing with the boys figures now. Like that was my dream. And boys is like all the same people behind the scenes,
right,
at least in the where it's Sony co-producing with Amazon based on a cult comic book, and there's a degree to which I feel like
that could have been me.
That we were like the guinea pig show.
For sure.
Amazon hadn't really done a nerd thing like that before. And I would always like talk to the executives and be like, shouldn't you be making more merch? And they had this very cautious wait and see approach. And even in terms of how they like positioned us at Comic-Con and stuff like that.
Right.
And I feel like they learned a lot of lessons from what they didn't get right on the tick.
Yeah.
Where then I feel like the boys hit the ground running. They had the figures ready to go.
I think about that all the time. I really
know.
do.
I feel like I missed it by like a hair. Where if we had been the second show,
right,
you know, then we would have had figures to coincide with when season 2 came out.
Yeah.
But yes, no, it drives me crazy. I still, you know, I would love to see someone do the classic tick, and then hope that maybe someday, selfishly, that also leads to doing Warburton era figures and figures from our era.
Yeah, I think that is, you know, signs say that's probably going to happen one day. Like I said, especially
Eventually.
a company like NECA, like it's in their wheelhouse. I can see them doing that. I
just think the character designs were so.
And no one
toyetic.
ever thought we would get April O'Neil and Casey figure from the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
even
movie.
Just that Gargoyles line would have been unfathomable 3 years ago.
The fact that Neca's even making this stuff is just wild beyond imagination.
Oh, they're going to go 20 characters deep into this? Yeah. Like, it's wild. I mean, I just remember having a moment on the set of season 2. There was for people who haven't watched the show, there was a team called the Flag Five that was sort of like the universe's equivalent.
Right. I mean, that's why I think of like the boys figures would look similar to the Flag Five figures. Right.
Right. And so there was like the first day we were shooting the sort of like Hall of Justice sitting around the round table in our red and white striped chairs scene. And it's like 5 characters all wearing costumes. And it's like me, the Tick, Ms. Lint in her Joan of Arc costume, Sage the Supernumerary, and Bronze Star. And I just remember looking around the room and saying to them, like, if we don't get action figures of this, someone has really fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how can we have these designs in front of us and still not have toys? But, yeah, hopefully someday. We'll see. But the art... I have no complaints about Orko not looking like me. I certainly feel
I can only imagine how
amount
exciting
of pride. I cannot wait
to be a toy collector who gets to do a show where you get your own toy. So congratulations on that.
Thank
you. All of the success that you've had with Revelation. I am super excited for part 2 coming out November 23rd on Netflix. Fuck the fans who are like complaining about this. This is like the best version of He-Man that I could have possibly imagined. I said that in my review when I wrote it. Everything that the show does is so smart. The writing is so great, and the voice acting is so on point. You guys are knocking it out of the park. So don't let the assholes online like deflate you. I know that when I watch Fat Man Kevin gets like really upset and stuff, it's like don't let them get to you because like there are fans who But you're never going to please those fans, right?
No, I'll say this to this point.
Make the show for me is what I'm saying, Griffin.
I also think, yes. And as much as the people who hate the show want to believe otherwise, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
The thing that's a bummer is like the level of aggression to the criticism. Because I am completely fine with criticism, and I also understand... I mean, this gets back to what I was talking about, but sort of just like trying to free myself of any preciousness about any of these franchises, right? Where I'm like, there's going to be no definitive version of He-Man.
Well, that's
there
the thing.
Are people where for them the canon is the mini comics that came with the figures, and that Filmation was a watered down version of that.
Absolutely.
Or
the
you
Lords
grew up
of
on
Power.
2000X, or you thought 2000X was an abomination, or you like the bios that were on the back of the packaging for classics, or you like the modern DC comics, or whatever it is, right? Where I'm just like, all of these are just an interpretation of these things.
100%.
We're going to continue rebooting these characters for the rest of time, for better or worse. I watched this show, and objectively, I'm like, it's so cool I get to be part of the exact He-Man show that I always wanted to see. Like what you said. And I truly don't think it's a biased opinion because there are a lot of things I've been part of that I think are dog shit. And when those things happen, I don't go on podcasts to promote them. I just never speak about them publicly ever.
I mean, I just love how it threads the needle because it's still like my 8-year-old self would have loved this show in 1983, right? And my 40-something-year-old self loves the show now. Like it speaks to both sides of me, right? And I think to your point, like there are like the fans who bitch about Revelation, the fans who bitch about The Last Jedi, like all of those, like they're the same type of fans, right? Like they don't like that Tila's at the center, they don't like that Andra's black, they don't like all of those things,
right?
Like we have to filter them out.
Yeah,
right?
and like I have seen valid criticisms from people who dislike the show for reasons that are not couched in those weird reactionary things.
That's fine.
And that is super fine to me. The bummer for me is when it feels like it's this defensive political thing. You know, people who are saying, I don't like the show because it's too political. And I'm like, you're the one politicizing it. You're the one projecting shit onto it and acting like this show is attacking you. But also it's just like, then maybe this version isn't for you.
Right.
That's totally fine. You know, like, as I said, I love Fozzie Bear. I love the Muppets. Maybe 2 out of every 3 modern Muppet things that come out, I go, not for me.
Didn't love the Jason Segel movie, right?
Like, I did love that, right?
Oh, no,
but,
like, the second one. The second one was the one.
I love that. That's the one that I like more than most people.
Oh, okay.
And other people don't like that, you know? But then, like, some of the stuff they've done since then, I'm like, you know? So it's, you need to accept that, like, if there's a version of these characters, of these stories that you don't connect to,
100%.
It's not an insult to you or the property. It's like, this one is for someone else, and there will probably be another one that's for you again soon.
Yeah, there will be your Rise of Skywalker. And there were other versions
before this that were for you.
Someone will make Rise of Skywalker for you one day.
Right. I just feel like, I don't know. I'm not one of these people who's like, if you don't like the show, then you're not a real fan.
Yeah.
My stance is, if you're saying that someone's not a real fan, then that sucks.
Right. 100%.
You should let whoever likes whatever version of the thing like it. And if you don't like it, then it's not for you.
I mean,
and it's a bummer.
And I feel like,
well, it makes sense. You want to love it, whatever. That's cool. I understand your disappointment. I felt it as well for other things.
That's a mature fandom that I think you and I have learned over the years, right? Because, like, I used to feel that way about the prequels. I used to feel that way about the Zack Snyder movies. Like yes. There are things that I don't agree with, but then I got to a point where I was like, why do I have to be mad about it? Like, my Batman is maybe this version, and you can have that version. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't have to hate it and degrade you because you don't like the same thing I like, you know?
That's my whole thing. So it's like, I'm you know, I love anyone who loves this version of the show. I totally respect anyone who doesn't love this version of the show. I ask people not to attack each other over which versions they like more. That having been said, it's like when I see like fan art, or like last night my YouTube algorithm gave me a supercut that someone had made of like all the Orko scenes in Revelation, and you sense that there is at least some section of the fandom that is latching on to the specific version that you helped make.
Right.
It feels so cool that like anyone is accepting this as being a proper part of the legacy of this thing.
100%. Griffin, I could
the figure feels like a part of that. Yeah, I mean, I relocated over to the corner of my apartment. That's my whole Orko collection, and we had so many things to talk about that we didn't even talk about any specific items. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I already see, like, you have the classics Orko. It looks like you have a prototype of the vintage Orko. Is that what that is?
This is a guy who makes these. I don't know his name, and I apologize in advance. But on Etsy, he does like porcelain castings.
Oh wow.
Of classic figures. So this is like a one of a kind, not one of a kind, but they're handmade, limited run porcelain Orkos. Yeah.
Do you have the vintage that came with like the zip line thing? I think didn't he?
I do. Where is he here?
This is real fascinating for people who are only listening to this
with the cord in there. Yeah. And then I had to collect a different one to get the coins for the magic trick.
Nice.
Because it's hard to get those intact. I have almost everything now. I mean, it was a good quarantine project. Is like.
Was that the goal? Just get like every version of Orko that's been out there?
Yeah. Which, look, there are other tendrils of my Motu collecting, but the Orko one is the one where I'm completist, where it's like, can I get Orko in every form factor, plush?
Nice.
You know, I have the erasers, I have keychains, I have like the sideshow statue here that's like the super high-end Orko. Let me take this off of its base, but like this badass, hyper detailed Orko.
You got the 2000X one somewhere, right?
I have 3 of them because there were very minor variations. So there's like, this is the 2000X one, right?
Yeah, which I think that statue is based on, right?
It's sort of, I think inspired by the Four Horsemen redesign. And then this is from the later when they did like the He-Man versus the Snake Men for year 2 revival. So it's the exact same figure in a different colorway. Right. That's a little more cartoon accurate. And then I have packaged here the Chase, which is the exact same figure except the color of his necklace is silver instead of gold. And same with the wand. So yeah, I have almost everything now. So you really are
completist, is what you're saying.
With Orko, yes. I was with Arthur, and I am with Orko, and the Orko one has proven to be a lot more difficult than the Arthur one. And I'm maybe like 3 items away for having everything that I'm aware of. But you go to PowerCon, you meet other Orko fans, and they start to tell you about things you didn't even know existed, and you're like, ugh, now I have to add that to my list.
So like, I
need to find the Orko nightlight.
So, but are you like limiting yourself to like official Orko products? Because if you start like going down Etsy, like, you know, rabbit holes, you'll never.
Right. Correct. Correct. I mean, like that porcelain one is an Etsy rabbit hole, right? My friend already made this one for me. That's a crochet Orko that I love. That's
if your friend makes it, that's an exception.
Sometimes I will see a craft thing that I like so much that I get it, but I'm not telling myself I have to buy any Orko that anyone makes, but I do want every officially produced one, and then any of the craft ones that really.
There has to be like a T-shirt with a big O on it. That's someone.
That's the thing I cannot find.
You would think.
Wild. There's the hoodie. Where is it? It's in the other room now.
Yeah. But that zips up the
right. So
face.
It's like a costume hoodie with the hat and everything on it. I have that, which like functions as sort of, if you hide the hood and that face covering and the hat's removable, you can make it just a hoodie with the big O on the center. The other thing I'm always sort of pushing Mattel on is I'm just like making like a. And I don't care if it's classic, if it's Revelation, if it's new show, what have you. It feels like such a gimme to do like a quote-unquote life-size plush Orko. Like the way Mattel has made so much money off of those Grogu plushes.
Yeah.
Where you just have the plastic head and hands. And Orko's like such a similar character at a similar size. Who's very huggable.
But that's the thing, too, with like the reemergence of Masterverse and Origins, like when you go down the Target and the Walmart aisles, like the fact, we talked about the distribution problems of Hasbro. Mattel doesn't have those problems. Like every toy aisle I walk down, it is filled with
and
Masters.
You're seeing Origins, Masterverse, and He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
Like 3 different lines for one property at the same time. I'm just like, just throw a plush Orko in there. It doesn't need to be my Orko.
Now that Orko's out, right? Or coming out with the maybe that opens the floodgates. And who knows? Maybe hoping. Part 2, there's some Orko stuff.
I don't know. I mean, I'll look. There are other things they've told me are in the pipeline because of being burned by the tick. I'll believe it only when I see it. So the only one that actually feels tangible to me is the one that they've shown.
Yeah.
But Orko has multiple looks in the first half of the season, right? We've only gotten one of them as a toy, the sort of like weakened Orko in his Last Stand look. There's still the Revelation design of the classic Filmation Orko.
He could come with like a big bubble or something, right?
Yeah, that was, I mean, look, I'm being selfish, but when they were like, he's too small to sell by himself, I'm like, make a pack that's multiple Orkos with a bunch of spell effects and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, I don't know, maybe conceptually, if Orko were to be in other episodes of the show, he would have yet another look that also could maybe be worthy of merchandise. So, I don't know. I hopefully, I don't know, they keep making stuff.
Yeah. Well, Griffin, I could probably talk to you for the rest of the evening, but we should probably stop there.
Yes.
This has been the longest merchandise spotlight ever.
Yeah. Finally, I win. Yeah.
Yeah, take that, David. Where can people find you on the internet, and what can they look forward to on Blank Check?
Blank Check, we're finishing up John Carpenter, which we've been doing for the last months. That's my podcast that you've so kindly mentioned. He hosts with David Sims, a film critic from The Atlantic, and we go through entire filmographies of directors who have massive success and got quote-unquote blank check status at some point. So we've been doing John Carpenter for the last bunch of months. Clear, and sometimes they bounce, baby.
Yeah. Thank you.
We've been doing John Carpenter and announcing soon who we're doing at the beginning of 2022. But yeah, that's the main thing. Trying to be on social media less and less.
Good
but
for you.
I'm at Griff Lightning on those places, and watch season 2 of Masterverse Motu Revelation. Masterverse is the toy line.
And buy the toys. Buy the Masterverse toys.
Well, certainly buy the toys, yeah, and watch the second half of the season, which I'm very impartial to because I'm not in any of those episodes. Because why would I be? Because we all saw Orko die.
You're dead. You're very dead.
Right. I'm very dead.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been such an honor and a pleasure. This is my, like I said, my sideways entry into the Blank Check universe. So I appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine.
You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and follow the podcast at ShelfConNOC. Our theme song is recorded by the one and only Jamie Noguchi. Also go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Subscribe on
youtube.com/The Nerds of Color for the video, and Apple Podcasts for the podcast. Give us a rating and review if you do. That'll help people find the podcast. Appreciate all the support. And always remember, Shelf Conscious is where we come collect.